Ah, Prussia, the stuff of legends in Germany and beyond. What made Prussia great? Was it their military might, which is a force to be reckoned with? Or was it the monarchs who ruled Prussia, who put Prussia on the political stage? I would argue for both points, but today I will focus on the latter topic, and give a rundown of my personal ranking of the men who made Prussia a military powerhouse, and the men who were totally incompetent yet somehow managed to keep the throne. Well, except for one. Before I begin the ranking, I will give an honourable mention to the monarch who sadly didn't qualify for this list. The penultimate king and emperor, Friedrich III, was full of potential. It was hoped he would bring about a new liberal era in the German Empire, as he was a vocal critic of Otto von Bismarck during his father's reign. However, a bout of laryngeal cancer killed him only 99 days into his reign. It is debated today about how Germany would look like today had he survived. And now to begin the ranking with who I think is the worst monarch of Prussia. Despite having the longest reign on this list of 50 years, Albrecht Friedrich was a disappointing duke, exacerbated by his potential. He was briefly considered for the Polish throne, but he was dismissed when he became mentally ill in 1572. He was controlled as a puppet for the rest of his reign. Not much more I can say about him, unfortunately, hence his low ranking. Friedrich Wilhelm IV had the rotten luck of being the King of Prussia during the 1848 revolutions, but he was the exact kind of king that would have probably provoked a revolution anyways. He believed in his divine right as king and vehemently opposed the proposed 1848 Prussian constitution, as he thought it was too radical. He reluctantly consented to a slightly revised Prussian constitution in 1850 on the advice of his ministry. He also rejected being named the German Emperor, as he didn't want to alienate Prussia from Austria, as he believed in restoring the Holy Roman Empire to how it once was, with Austria at the helm. Instead, he tried to form the Erfurt Union with Ernst August of Hanover and Friedrich August II of Saxony, but this was also short-lived. He then suffered a series of strokes from 1857 onwards and became incapacitated until his death, with his younger brother serving as regent. Are there any positives? Well, he helped expand the Industrial Revolution in Prussia and was a great patron of the arts, as he was remembered as a romanticist king. Other than that, terrible king. Poor George Wilhelm. If ever there was a time to be an incompetent ruler, then the early 17th century was not that time. In fairness, he attempted to remain neutral in the 30 Years' War, but was forced to join in 1625. Prussia Brandenburg was looted by the Holy Roman Empire, and later the Swedish during his reign, at which point George Wilhelm just gave up and retired to Prussia, where he died in 1640. Well, at least he tried. Wilhelm II is definitely the most controversial monarch on this list for a variety of reasons. His first huge blunder as emperor was to accept Otto von Bismarck's resignation in 1890. This was partially Bismarck's fault, as he used to threaten Wilhelm I with resignation if he didn't get what he wanted, and so it backfired with Wilhelm II. Despite building Germany up to be an industrial powerhouse, his reckless foreign policy made this hard work pointless. He would needlessly threaten other European powers out of paranoia and jealousy. This was what started the naval race between Germany and Britain and forced Germany to ally with weaker countries such as Austria-Hungary and the Ottoman Empire. And now, of course, there's the war, the Great War. Wilhelm took no responsibility for the decision-making in the military during the war and left Germany to practically become a military dictatorship under Paul von Hindenburg and Erich Ludendorff. Thanks to this tumultuous reign, Germany lost the war, the empire was abolished, The kingdom of Prussia came to an end and had disestablished centuries of Hohenzollern rule. Nice one, Wilhelm. Oh boy, the Napoleonic King of Prussia. Where do I even begin? Friedrich Wilhelm III had a promising start to his reign, as he dismissed his father's ministers and cut down royal expenses. However, he was a shy and indecisive man, which isn't really a trait which is associated with being the King of Prussia. His wife, Queen Louise, helped him rule the country and was the real power in Prussia for the first half of the king's reign. Friedrich Wilhelm was not able to resist the invasion of Napoleon Bonaparte, and the Prussian army had collapsed under this pressure. A far cry from the days of Frederick the Great. Napoleon harshly punished Prussia by greatly reducing their territories. To make matters worse, Queen Louise had died, and the king became devastated. But of course Napoleon was defeated, and Prussia made a comeback in 1814, gaining more territories than they had before the wars. He also set about trying to unify the Prussian churches, but this seemed to be a waste of time, as he was resented across the country for this. His decision to not allow a Prussian constitution was a poor one, as it would come back to haunt his successors in the years to come. In my opinion, not a great king. Even though his reign as duke was short, Johann Sigismund had served as regent for Albrecht Friedrich from 1611 to 1618, during which he equalized the rights of both Catholics and Protestants in Prussia. However, he converted to Calvinism and drew up plans in 1614 to convert all of Prussia to Calvinism, which failed. One of his major legacies was the personal union between Brandenburg and Prussia when Johann Sigismund became duke. He is this low on the list as the only goal he tried to achieve backfired spectacularly. Friedrich Wilhelm II had previously lived under the shadow of his uncle and made sure to change Prussia into his own image now that he was the king. Since Friedrich II encouraged use of the French language, Friedrich Wilhelm II promoted the use of the German language by inviting German writers to the Prussian academies. He also made a series of reforms which made the lives of the working class better, such as reforming the taxing system. However, upon the death of his uncle, Prussia became politically isolated, and the country felt threatened with the outbreak of the French Revolution farther west. Prussia gained eastern territories during the second and third partitions of Poland during his reign. He was a well-intentioned monarch who didn't have enough time on the throne to leave a long-standing impact. The first German emperor, Wilhelm I, was seen during his reign as the embodiment of Old Prussia. The main reason why he has this ranking is because of the German unification, thanks to his chancellor, Otto von Bismarck, and his successes during the Schleswig-Holstein War, the Austro-Prussian War, and the Franco-Prussian War. Despite being named emperor, Wilhelm was skeptical about accepting the title, as he was worried it would undermine the title of King of Prussia. During his reign, Bismarck reluctantly took part in the scramble for Africa, making Wilhelm the first Hohenzollern since Friedrich Wilhelm I to rule over parts of Africa. However, I believe that Wilhelm should have put his foot down and lay out a fair balance of power between himself and Bismarck, rather than allow Bismarck to become emperor in all but name. Nonetheless, Bismarck did keep the empire together, but did overshadow Wilhelm as he was pulling all the strings, and had pretty much turned Wilhelm into a figurehead emperor. Originally the Catholic Grand Master of the Teutonic Order, Albrecht was converted to the Lutheran cause and was convinced to establish a hereditary duchy in Prussia by Martin Luther of all people. He gained the Duchy of Prussia from his uncle, King Sigismund I of Poland, on the promise that Prussia would remain a Polish fiefdom. Albrecht enjoyed a peaceful early reign as he promoted education in Prussia by establishing schools and freeing serfs who pursued education. He is not higher on this list because at the end of his reign he was being controlled as a puppet by his fellow Lutheran theologians who were hoping to set up a regency for the Duke's son, the aforementioned Albrecht Friedrich. King Sigismund II of Poland had the main perpetrators executed, but Albrecht remained powerless for the final 2 years of his reign. He was the first European ruler to establish Lutheranism as the official state religion. Despite changing Prussian foreign policy to oppose the French, Friedrich I envisaged himself as the Prussian Sun King. His opposition to Louis XIV of France helped him to convince Holy Roman Emperor Leopold I to allow Prussia to declare itself a kingdom, as Friedrich argued that Prussia was never part of the Holy Roman Empire and should be allowed to become its own independent kingdom. To calm the Polish over his coronation, he claimed the title King in Prussia, rather than King of Prussia. He was also a notable patron of the arts in Prussia. However, the king spent lavish amounts of money on expanding his palaces and being obliged to pay the Holy Roman Empire and send 8,000 Prussian troops to assist the effort in the War of the Spanish Succession. Subsequently, he financially ruined Prussia and a rising corruption began during his reign. Friedrich Wilhelm was known as the Great Elector for a reason. At the beginning of his reign, he helped rebuild his territories, which were devastated by the 30 Years' War. In order to make this process smooth, he allowed religious tolerance of Catholics and Protestants to ease the divide. Following the end of the Second Northern War, Poland granted Prussia sovereign status, which meant that Prussia no longer had to swear fealty to the Polish king. Friedrich Wilhelm was one of the greatest military minds of his time, as he formed the image of the Prussian army being indestructible by defeating the Swedish at the Battle of Fehrbellin. He also established colonies in West Africa with mixed results. His rule as Duke of Prussia paved the way for Prussia to become its own kingdom and began a Prussian Golden Age. This is the king in Prussia, who tried to develop a race of extremely tall men to serve in the Prussian army. He was the definition of the Napoleonic complex, long before the Napoleonic Wars, as he only stood at 5 feet 4 inches and had an extremely short temper. Friedrich Wilhelm I greatly expanded the Prussian military by including conscription in the peasant classes of Prussia. Apart from military matters, the king was a believer of absolute monarchy and ruled Prussia with an iron fist. He abandoned the Prussian colonial efforts in West Africa, which greatly eased Prussia's financial burdens. The king sought to end corruption in Prussia, which was rampant in his father's reign. Friedrich Wilhelm also shared an anti-French sentiment with his father, and was known to go into full-on fits of rage at the mention of the country. Overall, a solid king whose rule of Prussia was largely effective. Does he even need an introduction? Friedrich II was of course the King of Prussia, who officially made Prussia a great power in Europe thanks to his conquering of Silesia from the Austrians. He also began the 7 Years' War in an effort to once again go to war with Austria, and while this war was a little bit embarrassing for the Prussians, it had a major impact in the overseas colonies of America. He was lucky, however, that Peter III of Russia was a Prussian sympathiser and ended the war despite being on the winning side. One of his main legacies lie with the Prussian army, as he significantly reorganised them into the armies that the Austrians could not defeat in the many Silesian wars. Friedrich also took part in the first partition of Poland in order to benefit from their regions, resources, and use it to further Prussian interests. Subsequently, without any Polish opposition, Friedrich styled himself as the King of Prussia. Friedrich was the embodiment of an enlightened monarch, as he modernised Prussia by making such reforms as those of the judicial system. He also supported the arts and allowed freedom of speech in Prussia. However, his relationship with the Crown Prince Friedrich Wilhelm was short of pleasant. Friedrich had arranged the Crown Prince's first two unhappy marriages, and was different to the Crown Prince in nearly every way imaginable, in an attempt to ruin the Crown Prince's image to enhance Friedrich's own image. In short, Friedrich was, and is regarded as the greatest Prussian king, but also the greatest Prussian to have ever lived. And there you have it, my opinion on how the Prussian monarchs ruled. I was personally surprised that Albrecht even made it into the top 5, even though he is hardly remembered today. For me there was no surprise with how low I put Wilhelm II, but with all the hype it gets nowadays it might come as a shock to some of you. I was also hoping to put Wilhelm I higher, but there's only so much I could do as he was practically a constitutional monarch under a certain Otto von Bismarck. I also thought Friedrich Wilhelm II would end up a lot lower on this list too, but he was a pleasant surprise. Were you surprised by any of my rankings? Please share what you would change on this list in the comments below, and also make some suggestions for future videos, such as a ranking of other monarchs, presidents, prime ministers, etc. Until next time, auf Wiedersehen.